I'll tell you how I arrived at this message today. I'm a little surprised myself. For how many weeks now? About week 5, maybe it is, or 6. I've been looking at the book of 1 John and reading the various scriptures and seeing what's written there in the Bible in this small book of 1 John that might apply to our lives and how we can understand our walk with God, how we can understand how to live a daily Christian life in a way that honors Him. And so I was studying this last week and had some notes jotted down on a paper about the kinds of things that I thought were the truth of the Scripture that we could draw out and extrapolate a little bit and look at that would be helpful. And I got almost through, and I just felt like, no, that's not right. This is October the 31st. I think there needs to be something about October the 31st. Then I thought, what will people think? Will they think it's some attempt to be cute or creative or whatever? And so I did this little short battle in my head about what other people think, you know. And finally I just stopped for a minute and I prayed and I said, Lord, you know, where can we go here with this whole October 31st thing? I realize it's not a biblical holiday per se, and in fact for some people it's the furthest thing from it, but where can we go with this? And so I started all over again. I began to write down some things and read some scriptures and pray. And so that's how I arrived where we are today, and I trust that the Lord will bless it to our hearts and inform us and refresh us and help us in our commitment to Him. One of the things that I remember is what a special day October the 31st was in our household when I was growing up. And if we could sit down and talk over a cup of coffee or something like that, and you could discuss with me why you think October the 31st was such a special day in the Lobby household, I don't think a single one of you would guess why it was. Now, a few of you might think you could, but I don't think you would. The reason it was quite a unique and special day in our household is because it was my brother's birthday. That's right. It was a little weird. No, just kidding about that. But it was actually, and still is. I have an older brother. He's 6 years older than I am. And he used to dominate my life pretty thoroughly when I was a little kid. And I always blamed it on the fact he was born on Halloween. But there are other things about Halloween that get our attention. Some people know the origins of Halloween and others don't, and most don't care. But it goes back to Celtic, really celebrations of when the summer and the fall turns into winter, and it gets really cold, and it's kind of like life turns to death. And in these celebrations and these ceremonies, they were recognizing the fact there is such a thing as life or death, but they came to a point in the fall where, for whatever reason, they felt like there was kind of a blending of the life and death thing. And some kind of weird things came out of that, but Christianity came along in about 600 and something AD, and in the 1st of November there was an All Souls Day. And so next thing you know, in the Christian communities, they began to celebrate an All Souls Eve. And so instead of celebrating what used to be celebrated in the pagan culture, they begin to celebrate in terms of All Souls Day, recognizing the beloved saints and beloved loved ones and those in the faith that had gone on before. And so they began to change the name. And it became known eventually as All Hallows Eve and All Hallows Evening. And as that language was with the ors and the eans and the nors and those kinds of things, it actually went from All Hallows Eve to Halloween and became Halloween. Now some people that are wonderful Christian people don't want anything to do with Halloween. It's about magic, it's about evil and all the rest of that, and that's okay. If that's a person's feeling in their heart, I don't have any problem with that. But I think that sometimes it's good to look at the roots of some of these things and then ask ourselves, do we want to live in those roots or do we want to live today? And let your heart dictate what is right and what is proper and what is good for you. If you stop and think about it, go back in history a little bit, when this country was first founded, it wasn't permissible to celebrate Christmas. In the Christian community, it was not permissible to celebrate Christmas. If you want to go back far enough, you find some unusual things that don't really ring a bell with us today. In fact, if you look at many of our holidays, you'll find there are some unusual. Look at the days of the week. Where do we get the names of the days of the week? From the Greek and Roman gods and goddesses. And so there's a lot of that history that has been incorporated, and you have to kind of sort out in your own heart and spirit how much you want to let that affect you. What I think about some of these days is, what does it mean to people today? How does it affect my neighbors? How does it affect my children? What is the meaning right now? Not what is the meaning in AD 100. That's not really where I'm living. But what do my neighbors think it means? And what does it mean for us? And sort it out in your own heart. You'll find interesting things about the history of Christmas. I knew some very good people that thought it was absolutely sinful to have a Christmas tree in your house or to deal with Christmas trees, because we all know about the roots of pagan worship and trees and all this kind of stuff. But that's not what it means in 2010 in America. But nevertheless, every person has a right to sort through these things and bring as much of the history to today as what they feel is appropriate for them. But even things like New Year's, if you know about New Year's and New Year's Eve celebrations, and even Easter, look at some of the things in Easter that is symbolic. They're cute things, they're things for children and stuff, but if you look back, there's a certain symbolism, and some of it's okay, and some of it maybe not quite so okay, but it has a history. And I think Halloween, as much as any, has a history, even Thanksgiving. Now, we know what Thanksgiving was, how it originated, certainly in America, and probably the most American of all holidays. And the roots don't go back very many centuries for us. That's something we can relate to pretty well. But today, what does Thanksgiving mean? Now, in some homes, most of my extended family, they'll take time around the table or before the meal is served or after the meal is served, and they'll talk about how thankful they are for what God has done in their life. But that certainly doesn't happen in every house in America. Some places it's strictly sports, some places it's strictly alcohol. One of the ladies in my church talked about when she was a young girl that she and her mother just slaved in the kitchen to make Thanksgiving dinners. But she says, in my years growing up, I never knew any of my aunts or uncles or relatives would ever eat any of it. They were all passed out on the floor. And so Thanksgiving is different things to different people as well. And that doesn't have much to do with the history of the big negative. It's all very positive. But what about today? How can these various things affect us today? And we kind of have to come to terms with that when it comes to Halloween. So I'm not telling you how you should think. I'm just saying go ahead and weigh it out and see what you think. In my home with my mother and father, they encouraged the kids to go to Halloween parties and have the same kind of fun that most of the kids that you see in the communities have today. But I want to talk just a minute about the Halloween thing. Do you have some memories of your childhood Halloween times? I remember when we first came down here, we sat in front of the front door at Bill and Leanne's house and had a couple of lawn chairs and were giving out candy and remarked to one another, wow, it ain't cold. Because for years before that, we had dealt with freezing sleet and blowing wind in Kansas City and froze to death trying to do some things outside. I lived in Wichita one year and I took my nephew out trick-or-treating down the street, and I think I went all of about 3 blocks. And I said, you know what, Robert? I said, I think we've got far enough for one night. You have some memories about Halloween as a kid? Good, bad, different?
Yeah.
Anybody want to share one that's humorous or not scary? We don't want to do scary things. Yeah.
You remember growing up in the Northeast and going out trick-or-treating and wearing your costume with a big jacket on top of it. Nobody knew who you were because you were wearing a jacket. It was so cold.
The jacket. Yeah. I remember when I lived in Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., there weren't very many houses. It was out on Telegraph Road, and they were spread out. And so as kids would walk for miles just to get to a few houses. I can remember coming back even as a kid. It'd take us 3 hours to go trick-or-treating. Michelle?
We lived out in the country, and we had next door neighbors, And I remember as I got older, we dressed up in my dad's clothes, and that my twin sister and we ended up taking the neighbor kids. Now our walk was like a half mile just to get to the next house, but there was a little, and we'd be out like 3 or 4 hours, and this was in Ohio, so we had some cold nights, but the warmest times was when I actually got to dress up in my dad's clothes, because I could wear a lot of warm clothes.
Well, is there any really downside to the Halloween celebration at all that we can think of? And in a sense there is. One of the things that's a bit of a downside is to make it a trivial thing, this thing about the dark side and evil, and to make it too trivial to where it's become a laughing matter, or to where it's real common. I've had the experience in times past of seeing the dark side of evil when it ain't funny. It ain't a holiday. It's not celebrating. It's life-changing. It's life-threatening. It's scary. And so there is a little danger in Halloween that we just kind of make it frivolous. The fact there is that, which is an evil side. And we see kids dressed up as witches and warlocks and zombies and all this and ghosts, and we kind of laugh about it. But there is a danger that the whole society will just shine this all off as child's play and not take it seriously. And to some degree, as a society, we have far more than in other cultures. So I want us to transition and go back to the day in which Christ lived. So we've got about 2,010 years or so to roll the calendar back and see what happened in the life of Jesus Christ. Now, this is not fantasy. This is what actually took place. It's recorded in your Bible, and you find it here in Matthew chapter 4. And this is one of the first instances where we see there's such a thing as a spiritual battle that's actually going on in the world. And we get it spelled out for us here in Matthew chapter 4, beginning with verse 1.